Hey, I'm Richie Castellano. I'm here with Steve Shank, and we are the producers of Blue Oyster Cult's Ghost Stories. And today we're going to talk to you about how this project came about and some of the intricacies involved with producing this and bringing it to you. So, I guess the first question is, why did we do this, Steve?
Well, after the phenomenal success we had with Symbol Remains, our label Frontiers was clamoring for another studio record. It wasn't really that we had a heavy schedule of delivering all this other stuff to them. We've kept up our fairly relentless touring schedule, and it took us a really long time to come up with Symbol Remains. I don't know that there was an opportunity to do something like that again. So it occurred to me that we could revisit some material that we never quite finished back in the day. And the time period that this covers is from between 1978 and 83, with the exception of the one track from 2016. So by happenstance, I was in an event at the Long Island Music Hall of Fame that both Albert and Joe were at. So I pulled them aside. I said, "Hey, I have an idea for this. The label's excited about this idea. What do you guys think?" And they both jumped on board with 2 feet fast.
None of this happens without the help of George Geranius, who was Blue Oyster Cult's. Yeah,
George was our audio engineer for all the golden years, pretty much from like day one until I guess about 83, 84. So he was around for obviously all the touring, but also all the rehearsals and a lot of the recording. Merrick, some of these recordings I believe were actually done in his loft in Brooklyn.
oh, wow.
So George basically recorded all this stuff, effectively with the band produced the original recordings.
And it was multi-track.
Right, they were multi-track recordings from, again, the period 78 to 83.
And it's both Albert Bouchard on drums for some of the sessions and Rick Downey on drums for
I think
with 2 songs.
2 or 3 songs.
Yeah, I don't know offhand. These were songs that were either workshopped for the records or
Some of this stuff was done while we were workshopping stuff for records. I mean, one of these songs, "Gun," we probably worked on it 3 different times in that time period. And for one reason or another, those didn't get completed. Also, sometimes some of this stuff was worked on while we were doing rehearsals for tours, specifically some of the cover stuff that they ended up putting in the show.
right. But there was never a studio version of them.
Well, there was,
Right, okay.
obviously, because it's on the record.
Oh, then, okay, yeah, right.
Right, but we never went and finished studio versions of what are the cover songs?
It's Kick Out the Jams, Roadhouse Blues.
We Got to Get Out of This Place.
Yeah.
Although one of those is only on the Japanese.
Right. I think it's Roadhouse Blues.
Right,
Yeah.
is a bonus track on the Japanese version. And again, the other ones were worked up during tour rehearsals with the idea that they might be recorded, but again, never completed, but got into the live show and stayed there for a while.
Right. So once everybody was on board with this idea, the next thing we had to do was actually get the material. So this was recorded by George Geranius on reel-to-reel analog tape, as is what you had in 78
Right.
to 83. And so what he had to do to get this to us is he had to actually bake the reel-to-reel tapes and then transfer them to digital audio so we can work with them. So it was really fun working with George because George is a great engineer, and the mixes that he sent us sounded awesome to begin with. But there were some issues. Some of them were degraded, some of the tracks were damaged, and in some cases the songs were just not finished. There were parts missing.
Yeah, there was more stuff that George sent us than is actually on the record. Some of it was unusable for a variety of reasons. Either like the original tapes were so degraded that there was just no way to resurrect them. There were other songs that there wasn't like a complete version of the song.
Right.
So Richie and I kind of sat down and we went through and listened to everything. And started figuring out where we needed to fix stuff where there was some bad tape,
Right.
which we'll talk about this very specifically.
And there's also multiple takes of some of the songs.
Yeah, correct. They were, and there were some were more complete than others.
Once we made the decision on what we were going to use, we used AI demixing software to separate the elements from the original tapes, and then it gave us something to mix with. But that process, even though it's getting better, it's not perfect. So things go missing.
Well, if you're Peter Jackson, it's perfect. I'm sure many of you have heard of MAL, which is the Peter Jackson software that the Beatles used to demix their stuff. We had to use the dime store version.
Yeah. So when we did that, we had to also assess what is left from the demixing process, because not everything made it. It's not as sophisticated as we'd like yet, but I'm sure it's going to get there eventually. So one thing in particular, Alan's no longer with us. Alan, I have tremendous respect for Alan, especially since I have to play his parts every night. So there were some piano parts, especially in the song "Shot in the Dark," where Alan plays some amazing, just quintessential signature Alan Lanier, almost rock and roll honky tonk piano.
God, I miss that guy.
Yeah, and it was half missing, but I could kind of hear what the part was, but it was just coming in and out.
Just to be clear, on that particular song, that's Alan playing straight through at the beginning. The degraded part of that was in the middle of the song.
Yeah, when the band kicks in, right?
Yeah. That's where Richie had to do his magic.
Yeah, when it's in the clear, it's no problem. But once the computer has to separate the parts, it becomes difficult. In the case of that song, what I did was I rebuilt his whole part with MIDI. And basically, if he didn't play it, I didn't put it on there. And anything that came out, I just listened to the faintest hint of what it was and placed the note exactly where he put it. So the way I think about it is that Alan is playing a MIDI controller, and that MIDI controller is me, and I'm replaying it through an appropriate sound. So that was one of the things we did. Other things happen where when you demix it, the drum sound goes from this to this. So what we were able to do is use some of the information there to trigger new samples. And
basically we have modern sounding drums because some of the original recordings could have been more hi-fi.
Yeah.
The purpose of those at that time wasn't necessarily to make a finished record.
Right. There were other parts, like if a guitar part was coming in and out, the easiest thing was just to pick up a guitar and do it. So I did that a couple times.
And there were a couple of things where there was, had we been in a studio finishing this song up in 1981, we would have put some guitar parts on that weren't there. So we added those.
Yeah. A little sprinkling here or there.
Yeah, not a ton. But there were definitely some parts added in a few songs. So Supernatural has guitars. Mm-hmm. Cherry has guitars.
Cherry, yeah.
And then there were, lead vocals that were redone recently. Joe re-sang something. Albert re-sang.
Jungle Fever? No, it's not called that anymore.
Yeah, it's got a different title. What's it called now? Soul Jive.
Soul Jive.
Yeah, so Albert came over here one night while we were working and re-sang it. So there are some new recordings.
Mm-hmm. And also Joe was really helpful. He gave us some new elements to bring in, percussion elements and background vocal elements that were newly recorded and sounded great. Once we had all of those elements, we were able to mix it, and then we pretty much mixed it like a normal record because everything was brought to the level that we needed it. It was mastered by Sam Stoff, our buddy.
So Sam, by the way, was the engineer who recorded the tracks for Symbol Remains.
That's right.
And he mastered Ghost Stories.
Mm-hmm. That's the album, Ghost Stories, and there's a video that's going to come out, the first video. It's for So Supernatural, and we had a lot of fun with this. We drove ourselves crazy with this, but it was the result is fun. It's a good end result. So the concept behind this was that and you could tell, maybe it means something different to me than it does to you.
Well, we just kind of storyboarded this thing out.
To me, it means there's a house where all this Blue Oyster Cult stuff is happening.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, and we actually used AI to generate an Imaginos looking house.
Correct.
Like from the cover of Imaginos. And so the idea is let's cram as many Blue Oyster Cult Easter eggs in there as possible. And I think it'll be a fun thing if people can try to figure out how many Easter eggs they can find.
Oh, good luck. You'll be there all night.
we put a ton in there. I mean, I think you and I just watched the Now and Then video for the Beatles, and they put all their Easter eggs. And I said, you know what? We have Easter eggs. We
got plenty of that.
Yeah, so we had a lot of fun with that.
And a big part of that process was trying to get what appeared to be band performances that were somewhat contemporaneous with when this track was. So we went back to some really old footage, which mostly was, a lot of it was shot by our fan buddy, Jim Valentini, which I'm sure you guys have all seen, all of those DVDs that we put up on the YouTube channel. So we pulled some footage from that. There was also some footage from the 1981 MTV concert in Hollywood, Florida, and Richie did his magic here, and it sort of looks like they're singing and playing that song.
We hope it looks like that.
well, we thought it did.
Yeah.
You'll let us know.
You'll let us know if we pull that off. The whole environment for this is computer-generated 3D animation, and we used 3D software called iClone and character creator from a company called Reallusion, and it's great stuff. And I've been learning how to use this stuff, and Steve was crazy enough to let me do this for the video. So we actually get 3D camera angles and can see this person going.
Oh, we spent a lot of time.
Yeah,
just that whole thing with the car at the beginning.
Yep.
Yeah.
It was a ton of work, but it was very rewarding to see the whole thing. And there are a lot of fun shots. I particularly like our Joan.
Yep. Yeah. Love that.
And and another funny thing, just a little behind the scenes thing. There's one shot in that video where is it Joan? Yeah, Joan walks past the 5 portraits on the wall of the band from the 80s, and as she walks past them, they age. And we didn't have a current picture of Rick Downey, so Steve picked up the phone and he said, "Rick, please send us a picture of you." And he sent us like a selfie like this, and that's what you see in the video. It's great. Yeah. And the other cool thing is once we got the album art from Stan Decker, right?
Right. Yeah. So we're starting to go through the approval process on the packaging for this. There was one frame that I wasn't happy with. They had a character in there I didn't like. So we actually substituted our lead character from the So Supernatural video. That's in the packaging.
Yeah. And that's I made that character in Character Creator. So it's a very powerful tool, and I was happy to get to have my little worlds collide here of Blue Oyster Cult and the nerd stuff I do on the side. So yeah, then I think I'm really happy with the video.
Does that make me the nerd on the side?
It does, I guess. Okay. So enjoy the video, So Supernatural, and enjoy the album Ghost Stories from Blue Oyster Cult.
We're back.